Tonight, the U.S. poised to send additional forces to Iraq, that as Islamic militants advance across the country, carrying out deadly attacks. This, the U.S. considers working with Iran to end the crisis. Is this the right move? And will the city of Baghdad unbelievably fall next? And today, believe it or not, marks 20 years, the 20th anniversary of this unforgettable chase. Yes, the white Bronco. Former NFL icon O.J. Simpson leading the LAPD on a slow-moving chase after skipping his court appearance surrounding the murder of his ex-wife and her friend. What kind of impact did this case have, not just on pop culture, but also, how do you think America's reaction would have played out differently if this happened today? Plus, the U.S. kicks its way to victory, beating Ghana at the World Cup. We'll have a look at some of the highlights from Monday's game and also look at how the world is reacting. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. We have that and much more in the next 60 minutes. I'm Richard French, and thanks for joining us. Well, we begin tonight here overseas in Iraq, where ISIS, those militants, are continuing their deadly advance towards the capital city of Baghdad. The insurgency, it has stormed key cities of Mosul, Tikrit, and tonight the militants are in the city of Baqaba. That's located less than 40 miles north of Baghdad. ISIS wants to enforce a strict Islamic state of Sharia law in the region and erase the borders between Syria and Iraq. Well, today authorities reporting deadly clashes between Iraqi security forces and ISIS. 9 militants were killed along with 52 prisoners after ISIS threw hand grenades into a local prison. The crisis, it is sending shockwaves not just around the region but the world, especially after these photos surfaced online over the weekend. And I want to warn you in advance, extremely graphic. The regime, it captured Iraqi government soldiers, then loaded them onto a truck bound for a shallow grave. The men executed face down with their hands tied behind their backs. Now, President Obama has told Congress that he is sending up to 275 additional U.S. soldiers, Marines, as well to Iraq. Now, 170 of them, they'll be sent to protect Americans at the embassy in Baghdad. U.S. has also sent for warships, including a U.S. carrier able to launch 40 fighter jets, as well as 2 ships capable of firing cruise missiles. The President is also considering sending 100 special operation forces to Iraq as advisors to the Iraqi troops. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Secretary of State John Kerry say Washington is contemplating ways to curb the violence.
I think we are open to any constructive process here that could minimize the violence, hold Iraq together, the integrity of the country, and eliminate the presence of outside terrorist forces.
Sunni, the Shia, the Kurds, the rest, they have to come to a political solution, or else this is an endless conflict, and we don't want to be part of an endless military conflict.
Let me do a translation of Washington speak. They don't know what the next step is here, but you can be rest assured that there is not appetite in Washington, if you believe the polls, for American intervention on the ground with major boot commitment. All right, let's bring in a panel on this. C. Scott Vanderhoff, an attorney, former Rockland County executive. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. In a minute, guys, I'm going to bring in a part of a conversation I had with New York Congressman Gregory Meeks from earlier today, because there is quite a bit of blame game. But before we get to the he said, she said, if you will, in D.C., let's talk about what our viable options are and really where the American appetite is for this. This is a slow-moving or fast-moving, depending on your perspective, in Technicolor, worst-case scenario playing out in Iraq right now. I mean, thousands of American lives were lost, trillions in terms of when it comes to blood and treasure and dollars that were spent there, and all that work really melting away before our eyes over there. But that all said, I think we walk down the streets, whether it be a Rockland or any community in this region here, very few, if any, people are going to say, let's go back in.
Well, I agree with you, but I think there may be a fundamental misunderstanding of what this is about. This is not about Syria. It's not about Iraq as a border state. It's sectarian violence, sectarian, disturbing to sectarian historical violence, which means that boundaries don't mean much. And when you begin to consider the countries involved here, not just Iraq and Syria, but Iran, Saudi Arabia, which is primarily Sunni, which is representing the ISIS is a Sunni group. There are tremendous complexities with this that I think just beyond just the military issue, this is not a country versus country. And one of the biggest mistakes I think the United States could make is on behalf of those over 4,000 combatants of American combatants who died, to further increase our involvement in something which is historically just not solvable.
And the problem is that none of the groups right now seem to have that vested an interest in solving this in a way where everybody gets along and everybody comes together and works out some peaceable solution. The Sunnis are the invading force here. They're looking to overrun the country. The Shia are not looking, under the current president of Iraq, not looking to include the Sunnis in their government. You have the outside interests of Iran playing into this and other regional interests. Israel just wants a peaceable solution to everything that protects it. But nobody, it's not like you're going to have a peace treaty where this resolves and everybody comes together and works out terms where everything goes away. I do not see a path right now towards anything other than just a defensive position by the United States trying to protect its interests.
And Dom, to me, what further complicates this, I agree with everything that both Scott and Andrew said, is you got Maliki in this situation, who's the same guy who told us, get out of here. Hit the bricks. We don't want you around American troops anymore. He did his best to make sure that at least the perception was among the Iraqi people, I'm looking out for the Shiites, I'm not looking out for the Sunnis. So now you have all that and a lack of any kind of trust from all the sectarian violence that's gone on for centuries there, let's be honest, to say that there is any government that's really looking to bring in all parties. So you have that level of mistrust that's been ingrained over generations, fomenting to the top, and we're going to go out of our way to help a guy who didn't even want us there. And all the corruption claims and everything else that went on top of that, it's a mess. But still, you look at the picture and you say, can we just sit back and watch this? It's tough.
But the bottom line, there's a lot of posturing going on from all sides. The bottom line, this is a never-ending battle, which I think you're alluding to, and it just seems that the U.S. is being pulled back in. The president has already committed to no boots on the ground, but you see military aircraft and aircraft carriers being shipped to the area. You have the special forces. You have the 275, I believe, Marines. Slowly but surely, we're being pulled back in. What happens if, God forbid, one of these soldiers are murdered? What happens at that point?
Again, you got to protect the embassy, and I get that, and I think they've relegated. But I will tell you, speaking of folks in Washington, I thought airstrikes, that's something that they can agree on. There's some show of force here, but at the same end, there's not the boot commitment. There's even reticence in Washington to even do airstrikes right now among some folks because it's not as clean like the video game like some people want to think it is. We're not talking nation states fighting here. You're going to get civilians caught up in this. It's a mess. Now, we talked about this earlier in the week. What has shocked me, we all agree how complicated this is, but there are some in Washington who are oversimplifying Iraq, and they love to just blame, in this case, the president. Now, I'll take this president to task for a lot of things, but somebody's got to explain to me how Iraq is President Obama's fault. Well, Gregory Meeks, the New York congressman, he went after earlier today another media outlet, Senator McCain, for some of the comments he made. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, is Congressman Meeks. Take a little bit of a listen to part of our conversation from earlier today. I've had folks around my table at night and other folks in D.C. who say, man, has this president, meaning Barack Obama, really screwed up Iraq? And I'm doing a double take saying, wait a minute. How exactly we get into this into the first place here, and how is it the president's fault about the country disintegrating before our eyes? I know you made some headlines yourself here when talking about some of the comments that Senator McCain had to say, but it seems that there's a lot of revisionist history going on here, isn't there?
You got that right. Look, it was George W. Bush who went into Iraq, number one, without any cause. There was no weapons of mass destruction, nor was there any connection to 9/11. So we went in and we blew up that whole scenario. And remember, at that time, these same ideologues who was trying to blame this on Barack Obama said it would cost no dollars, no American dollars, and very few American lives. Some 4,500 lives later, some trillions of dollars later, we are still haunted by that decision. was the Bush administration that put Maliki into power in the first instance. And Maliki has gone in and he has done just the opposite, or the same thing really, what Saddam Hussein was doing, except now he's doing it and did it to Sunnis, which caused them to be alienated from the government and caused the kind of sectarian fight that we have right now. Not Barack Obama's doing. And then Barack Obama tried to negotiate to leave some of the American troops in Iraq. But it was Maliki who said, no troops. America has to leave, have to get out. So where Barack Obama has blame in this, I have no idea.
But you know what? You hear it. You hear it a lot. And to me, you want to blame the president for certain things, have at it. But how Iraq's his fault? And I keep hearing it, not just from usual suspects you'd expect here, but people state it as declarative fact. That one blows me away.
Well, but I think, you know, it's politics as usual. The congressman is wrong, of course. The tyranny under Hussein was unbelievable. Ask the Kurds. I mean, there were mass executions.
But that's not why we went in. I agree. He was a bad guy, terrible guy. But it wasn't. We went there for those WMDs we never found.
And who went into Libya with an idea of correcting Libya? And now that we have Libya, is still part of the problem with the Sunnis in Syria, who has had a misguided policy in Syria. So I don't think he's to blame for Iraq. By the way, I think, and I said this at the time, it wasn't winning the war in Iraq, it was winning the peace, because it never has been peace between the Kurds, the Sunnis, and Shiites. One other point, it's not Obama's fault, but he's got one big decision here, because Baghdad and the shrines that are down there will be protected by the Shiites. It's the breakup of Iraq is, my view, what's going to happen here at the end of the day.
And it's kind of what Biden predicted. But my thing is, for everyone to conveniently say that we're in Iraq because of this president and this was mishandled and everything else, I just think is playing so free and easy with the facts.
The facts remain. This president inherited 2 wars. This president ran on a platform against the war in Iraq. A fellow Democrat, Hillary Clinton, voted for support of the war, and at the end of the day, as we all know around this table, it cost Hillary Clinton dearly, where she lost the Democratic nomination, and the upstart out of Chicago, who was against the war all along, that platform took him all the way to the White House. So this president was against the wars from day one, and he inherited both of them.
The only even remotely legitimate argument against President Obama in all of this is the surge that we did late in the Bush administration, and Obama kept a presence going on in Iraq, and you could make the argument that had he continued the surge or had he increased the surge, that perhaps you could have allayed some of the violence that's going on in Iraq right now. The problem with that thinking is there's no end game to it. Because at some point you would have to reinforce those troops with even more troops. You'd have to keep cycling American blood and American money and military might into that region indefinitely. Yeah. And there was no way that we could be an occupying force in Iraq forever.
Dominic said this many times. Ex-presidents always make for interesting reads when they do their narratives, or biographies, or whatever the case may be. No one book I'm going to want to read more than this president's perspective. But I think of all the things that he might have thought he got raw deals on or mishandled, whatever else, I think he's going to say the biggest regret of his presidency is he walked into somebody else's mess. 2 wars, an economy that was bordering on a depression here, and he never got a chance to do it. Now, I'm not saying that he's faultless. He could have done things differently, should have done things differently, but I think that's going to be the overarching narrative where he said, I really feel like I had to continue the last 8 years that I walked into, and I think the Iraq and Afghanistan certainly at the top of that list. We will see. All right, when we come back here, talk about some of the challenges New York has. Well, if they look across the river, they got it good. New Jersey right now, where Governor Christie and the state lawmakers are working to tackle a nearly $2 billion budget gap here. And trust me, there's a lot of political motivations on a lot of different players going on at the same time. Will the Republican governor and the Democratic legislature reach common ground, or could they actually be going towards a government shutdown? We'll talk about that with state lawmakers after this.